The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Bronx Roots. David Hubler, Michael Preminger. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And David and Michael are here, and they are anxious to talk to both of us in the audience. How you doing, guys?
Oh, we're fine. It's fine. The day of changing the time over, you sort of, you're a little woozy there for a couple of hours when you lose an hour of sleep.
Yeah, it took me at least an hour to push the right button this morning. So
there were articles. I saw an article of things to do to acclimate, is that the right word, to the hour change? Get a lot of sleep and avoid asparagus. I don't know. There's all kinds of things that they said you should do.
Did we have that as kids? I don't remember a daylight savings time as growing up.
I don't know. I think there was such a thing as wartime during the war, but I was much too young.
I wasn't even around during the war.
Oh, you missed it. It was good. It was good. It ended well.
Yes. It ended well, but it went right into another one. And into another one, and into another one. And it just never stops, really.
No, it hasn't.
But, as a country, to be serious, we got some good news today, this week. I think Korea, for whatever reasons, North Korea, Trump will blame it on his dear old self, and they seem to be coming to the table, if you will. And, in a world where we haven't had very good news in the past months, year or so, this struck me as good news.
It's hopefully, and
I'm
not a politician, but maybe something anything to do with Trump and something positive. I'm not.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Michael.
You're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Well, it could. I mean, first of all, they, being serious for a moment, there's no real team in the administration that can handle the Korean situation. There's no ambassador to South Korea. The top two experts on North Korea and the Korean Peninsula have resigned. One was in the National Security Council, and I forget what the other one was. They're gone. There's no one at the State Department for I guess it's Near Eastern Affairs or Far Eastern Affairs, and so they've got nobody. And the big mistake, which is what all the pundits are talking about, is that Trump immediately said yes. I mean, and you just don't do that sort of thing. So he's stuck because he said yes, and now who was it? Somebody was. Oh, I know. I was listening to this book review, and it was very interesting. It was written by a Bulgarian, actually, and he wrote this book, and half of it was about the demise of dancing bears. Apparently, dancing bears were a great act in Europe for many years, and the bears were hooked with a ring through their nose. So the trainer, and it was a very sensitive part of their nose. A very sensitive part of their body. So the trainer could just yank on that, and the bear would do what it had to do simply because it was so painful to him or to her. And he equated that with the way the Soviets handled all the East European satellites. They'd tug on the bear, and of course the bear would perform. And I think it's quite possible that yoke is now right on in Trump's nose, and Kim Jong-un is pulling on the lead. So we'll see what happens. But and that's my punditry for the day, for the week.
Okay. Well, let's
very interesting.
let's turn the conversation to something not serious.
Yeah, of course.
What Steve Allen or Jack Parr used to say, "I'm only serious." I think it was Jack Parr.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was one of his.
Jack Parr?
Jack Parr. I'm only serious.
No, I'm only serious. Huh.
I think that was a great line.
I never. He was a caustic guy. Did you ever meet him, Michael? I never did.
No.
He was before your time at NBC, wasn't he?
What's that?
I was there as a page. I was on the page till like 64, 65. So it was long after Jack Parr.
Oh, I remember the one.
Did the talent treat the pages with respect, or would they just gophers?
I had no, not reaction. I didn't deal, I don't know, I didn't deal with the talent. So. Oh, okay. I just didn't.
I know you used to give guided tours around there. You once told me a funny story about the guided tours, and Flipper. Do you remember that story?
And Flipper, no.
Yeah, the TV show.
Yeah, but I know I did the tours. Flipper.
I think it was
that
Flipper.
Me?
Yeah, I still remember it. You don't remember it. I remember it.
No.
You told it to me.
Because Flipper was a film show. Why would it have been?
Right, it was a film show about a porpoise or something.
Yeah.
And somebody in the group once asked you if the tour is in Rockefeller Center in the middle of Manhattan.
Right.
And somebody asked you if that's where they filmed Flipper.
Oh, that's possible. That's possible.
I always remember.
Oh, they used to ask if Doc Severinsen is a real doctor, and some of the questions were very interesting.
How did you get the job, Michael?
Oh, there was a friend of mine. I was in graduate school, and a friend was a page, and so he got me an interview, and I got the job.
Okay.
I think I started just as not giving the tour. Well, maybe I did. Just through an interview, I was so brilliant that they couldn't resist.
Well, you were in graduate school. I think that was a requirement, wasn't it, for being a page? You had to have your bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Is being a page what motivated you to be a comedian? Being around it, or?
It kind of helped. I think I've mentioned that the tours were supposed to be 50 minutes, and mine were usually about an hour and 50 minutes, because I just kept talking and making stuff up, and so it kind of, there I was in front of a group of people, so it actually did kind of help or motivate me to do it in front of an audience that wasn't moving.
Right.
Yes,
and
in their seat.
Some laughs and smiles, and for a comedian, once you're on stage of any kind, and you get some positive reaction to your oratory, it doesn't have to be all funny, but that's a good feeling, and that's a feeling of that you want with you for a long time. And I think that, again, you taught traffic school, as did I, and to be able to stand up there for a long time and to keep people's interest, you got to be special in some way, really. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how the people, I should say I don't know how, the people who, 98% of the people who do traffic school, who do so-called instructors, are very serious.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how they do it. I mean, I guess they just, I don't know. as we've talked about it, I just had fun.
Maybe all of them, or most of them, were involved in a serious automobile accident. That could.
Is that right?
I don't know. I'm just saying. If I'd been involved in a serious automobile, I'd want people to pay attention and do the right thing.
Yeah,
Maybe,
right.
Right.
Or I know this one lady spoke about drinking and driving for 2 hours. Maybe she had been in an accident or somebody she knew had been killed. It could get very serious, those.
Yeah, that's really the secret of being a good traffic teacher, is eliciting stories from the people who are there and let them.
I think so. But in some of these classes, some of the people are told, don't listen to stories. You just instruct. I don't know. It's been a while. I had a good time while it lasted, and now it's a memory.
Yeah.
Well,
so
you had asked about Ralph. You had mentioned getting a reaction from the audience, and I had gotten this contract back in like the late '80s or so during the Reagan administration. To do a comedy book. I had pitched it to my agent, and this is one of the big differences. When you're trying to write comedy, there's no one there to laugh at you. I mean, you're just sitting there with in my case at that time, it was an electric typewriter. They don't laugh, at you. So you don't have the opportunity to really find out whether something is funny or not. I mean, what I wrote I thought was funny to me, and apparently the publisher liked it. Although I got a ending story of this. The book was called "The Politician's Health, Diet, and Sex Guide." And it started out simply because the original title was "Delay Your Midlife Crisis till you're 50 and you'll live to be 100." But that didn't seem to work. So we did this book because he wanted something more timely. So I did a book, and periodically, as I would turn in, he said, "Well, I need another 4 pages." Well, you just don't sit down and write 4 pages of comedy. But I did the best I could, and I thought the book was fairly funny. I did an interview with a radio show in Denver, a call-in kind of thing, and the host started to ask me these questions. And he said, "You talk a good deal about Nancy Reagan in the book." And he said, "How's that going?" I said, "Oh, how did that go?" or whatever. I said, "Oh, wonderful. Nancy Reagan is now learning cooking so well that she can actually put the frozen bag in the boiling water without burning her fingers." and the phones lit up out there in Denver. And no, they did. And the host, I guess he was getting it through his earphone. Somebody in the room there, the whatever you call it, was taking these phone calls, and people were irate that I would make fun of the first lady like that. So that was a good reaction that I had to the book.
Yes, if they're reacting in a negative way,
it's nothing.
I know it's nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. I can imagine Saturday Night Live doing stuff about her. But I mean, gee whiz.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I mean, and it was. Yeah, and it was the book was totally bipartisan. I had stuff in there about Tip O'Neill doing exercises, and if you remember, the denouement, if you want to call it, of this book was every year the American Booksellers Association, I think they've changed the name now, but anyway, American Booksellers Association had a conference in one venue as they went across the country over 3-6 years or so. And in fact, Mike, I visited you a couple of times when I was out there doing those things. And this particular one, the year my book came out, was right here in Washington, and it was an election year, if I recall. So I said to the publisher, let's promote the book. It's here in Washington. There's a big political talk. He said, well, no, we've got another book that we're going to promote. So when I got to and I said, I'm here. I can be on the floor the whole time, to promote the book. It didn't cost anything for him or anything for me, really. So he didn't buy that. He was not a particularly adventurous or forward-thinking publisher, and that's why they went out of business a few years later. But so I got onto the floor and I go over to our booth, and there's a couple of copies of the book there. But next, right at the corner of the booth is a big garbage pail, and I forget what it was filled with, but it was advertising the book that was going to be the big bestseller, and it was called Gifts from the Garbage. And that was the name of the book. That was the name of the book. And it taught you things like how to decorate egg cartons, or what you could use egg cartons for. I mean, it was absolutely ludicrous. The only people who stopped by the booth were people who were throwing away garbage in the garbage pail. I mean, it was a total fiasco. Yeah, it was a total fiasco. Yeah, right. It was a total fiasco. But
so your book sounds so funny. So I don't remember. I know you've written at least 3, now 4 books.
4. Yeah, that's right. 4. Yeah, and
that's great. That's great.
Give us a list of your books, David.
Well, the first one I did was called "You Gotta Believe." Back earlier, before the political lampoon book, I used to be a pretty not active, but I used to watch the New York Football Giants were my team growing up.
Yay!
And yay! And if you recall, well, you may not, but one year they had one of the world's worst teams. I mean, they just couldn't win for anything. And they were really the laughing stock of the league for about 2-3 years. Anyway, my idea, I said to myself one day, these guys couldn't win if God was their quarterback. That gave me the idea to do this comic novel about a character who suddenly appears, and his name is Guy O'Downey, G-O-D.
Oh, wow.
And he cannot, because he's God, he can't lie. So whenever they ask him questions, he has to either tell the truth or figure out a way, to get around the question. And of course he makes the team as a starting quarterback. And my favorite all-time real fictional character, Richard Nixon, shows up in the book. And Nixon has the idea, because he opened China, that if the franchise were to move to China, they would have millions and millions of people to draw from. So that was one of the aspects of this comic novel, was getting the NFL to agree for Nixon to move the team to China. And there was another aspect of the book too, because I've always found that the NFL was this insidious organization that just preyed on the fans' money. I've said numerous times that they could play those NFL games in an airline hangar and they'd make as much money simply because it's all TV revenue, and they don't care about the fans being there. They play the whole season, and then they play the championship game in a city that's usually half a continent away from where the fans are. So, then this talk about truth, stranger than fiction. One of the things that I had the NFL planning to do was to copyright colors. All the team uniform colors would be copyrighted so that nobody could use the colors for anything else but without the permission of the NFL. Now, when you go through the colors of the team colors, There's just about every color there is. So the idea would be that the NFL would wring millions and millions of dollars just from a team that wanted to say, create a flag or whatever. So that was another aspect of the book. And what's interesting about it, it was published by New American Library as an original paperback. And of course, like everything in publishing, the editor over there really liked it. And then again, this was the first time I had gone out to the ABA conference, and that one was in Anaheim. And I met the guy, and he went back to New York, and they fired him. So my support for the book was nil. You know, people taking over other people's projects are not going to put as much time and attention into it. So, and then the book comes out, and it came out about 3 weeks or so before the Super Bowl. And I saw it on the bookshelf. It was Walden Books. And then they yanked it. And I said, how can you yank a book about football 2 weeks before the Super Bowl? I mean, so anyway, that turned out, but that's typical of publishing. So that was a comic novel, and then I did The Politician's Health Guide and Sex Guide. And then I wrote, what did I? The third was
you wrote about the bullying.
Yeah, the bullying book. That was a children's book called The Too Tall Troll in the Tiny Toll House, and it was full of puns and alliterations so that adults could read it to their kids. And
I love that book.
Yeah, and it was thank you. You're the one who read it, right? It was a good object lesson in why kids shouldn't bully one another, and I thought it would be good for Alec Elam. And it was interesting because it was illustrated by a guy who did really great illustrations. And the only thing I insisted on was when the main character, he put him in a baseball cap, and I said, well, you got to put an NY on the top of that hat. So he did that. So that was the third, and then of course the fourth was really a serious researched a book, The Gnats and the Greys. So that's where I am now. And
okay. The book that's out now is The Gnats and the Greys.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And why don't you, because we don't really get to do this very much, selfless self-promotion is the name of podcasting. And why don't you tell us all about how to get that book? And maybe, and there are a lot of folks that listen in this venue who want to get a personal autograph on that book. How can they do that?
Well, the full title is The Gnats and the Greys, How Baseball in the Nation's Capital survived World War II and changed the game forever. It's published by Rowman and Littlefield, publishers of Lanham, Maryland, and it's available by ordering through Barnes & Noble or Amazon. Amazon is a good way to do it. It's out in paperback now. The original came out 2 years ago. It's a good time to pick it up as the baseball season begins. It's more than just what happened in baseball, or it's not a listing of games day by day. It's actually the story of both the Washington Nationals / Senators, we call them, and the Homestead Grays, which was the Negro League team that played many of its games here in the D.C. area, in D.C. On weekends when the MLB team was out on the road. And there's a lot of there's some humor in it. There's a good deal of humor in it too, but it's not intentional humor. It's a good story about how it's that whole era. If you're a baseball fan or even a sports fan, how that whole era was sort of, it is today still overlooked, simply because the only thing most people know about is that the big stars like DiMaggio and Ted Williams and Bob Feller, all of those guys were off in the service. But there were a lot of other ball players who came up either simply because they were filling spots vacated by the veterans, or because they actually were really good ball players who just couldn't serve in the service, actually, for one reason or another. And there are some humorous stories there. So I'll just give you one example. The Senators, and they were really called, the official name was Washington Nationals, all the way up to like 1957. Then they became the Senators again. But in this case, Clark Griffith, who owned the team, an incredibly interesting guy, he found, because there were no GMs in those days, so the owners did a lot of the trading and all this stuff. He discovered that he needed an outfielder somewhere around mid-season, 3/4 of the way through the season. He needed an extra outfielder, and for one reason or other, there was no one available in the minor leagues, I guess. So he knew of a former major leaguer who was now working for the New York City Sanitation Department. And he got in contact with him and, asked him, come on down, and play out the season with us. Well, in today's day and age, nothing like that would even happen. But he said no. I mean, he turned down the chance to play Major League Baseball simply because he was afraid of losing his sanitation department pension. It's true. I mean, you think about it, it's ludicrous. So, Clark Griffith, who was never one to take no for an answer and had the greatest connections in the world because he was a very close friend of FDR, he went to the New York City mayor at the time, Fiorello LaGuardia, and presented his case to the mayor. And LaGuardia arranged for him to take the player to take a leave of absence from his detail on the garbage route, or whatever it was, and come play baseball, and he would not lose his pension. So he came down to Washington and he played. He did fairly well and nothing special, but they needed a warm body to fill a spot for a while. And so he agreed to come down. So there are loads of stories like this throughout this book.
That's a great story.
Yeah, I mean,
of course, you have the owner, then the mayor of a city of New York.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
That's great.
And FDR used to call Griffith periodically to get inside tips on the team because he would have these friendly bets with his cabinet. And of course,
kidding.
Yeah, the cabinet members, they didn't know that he was getting, they knew, he was in contact with them. But I mean, they were just friendly bets. Franklin Roosevelt did not need anybody else's money for one reason or another.
Right.
But
now, all these things, then, David, and of course, it's a great book. It's just a great book.
Thank you.
And these stories like this was research that you did, right?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Boy.
And I might add, a labor of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was truly a labor of love. Yeah, and it really, and
you didn't feel like you were going to work when you were writing this book?
No, not at all. I couldn't wait to get down here to the office and turn on the computer and dial up all these old news. That was another great thing about all of this is how easy it is these days to do research from home. It's remarkable what's available. I did go down to the Library of Congress a number of times to look at old newspapers that I didn't have online and to find photos for the book that I couldn't find online. And, of course, the Library of Congress is probably one of the greatest assets in the U.S. government. I mean, people come to me and say, oh, the government, they can't do this, they can't do that. I say two things. I said, one, if there were no FAA, would you get on a plane? And the other thing, I say, go down to the Library of Congress and ask them for any book in the world. And they either have it or they'll get it for you. So that's how I did a good deal. Plus, interestingly enough, I guess, I had started this book a good number of years ago as a novel, And I was able to get in touch with a few of the surviving ball players from that era. And sadly, by the time the book came out, they'd all died. But I did get some interesting insight from these guys who played. And, remarkable. I mean, there was one pitcher, he won 20 games one season in 1945. And in talking with him, he was so appreciative of the interview, because nobody was calling these people, for years. This is like 2012, 2013, and it just perked him up. In one case, I tried to contact one of the key characters in the book. The book I was trying to write, the novel, was the third string catcher on the team, and I actually was able to find the name and address of the second string catcher on the team, because the big catcher who died, and I wrote to him, and I wound up not hearing anything for quite some time, and finally, months later, I got a note in the mail from his wife / now widow, who wrote to thank me for remembering him and how much it meant to him as he was dying to be remembered as a ball player. They were living in Miami area. He was he was a Cuban exile, not exile, but he was a Cuban-born ball player. So there's
a guy named Estabella?
No.
Because there was a Cuban wartime catcher whose son or grandson played in the majors in the 90s, Estabella, and I thought that might have been the guy. That would have been a...
No. So anyway, that...
What? Estabella. Esther, come here.
Or maybe they were Siamese twins, Esther and Bella.
It's like the niece and the nephew.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's no ER in Esther when you say it from New York. It's Esther.
No, right.
With an A.
That's right.
Esther,
anyway.
How do I look in this outfit? Esther.
Well, anyone who buys the book, let me finish. Anyone who buys the book and wants an order can get in touch with me through Ralph at Comfortably Zoned Radio. There's a website, and just put it, and we can work something out.
We'll work something out.
Yeah.
I got to get my piece of the action somewhere along the line. I don't know how it works. Work it out. It's the Bronx roots that makes me want a piece of the action.
The action, yeah.
The action. Can you tell me and the audience, David Hubler, not the editor-in-chief that you're dealing with or the publisher, how does an author communicate and coordinate a book through the working editor? Like, you write stuff, and he not only edits it, but does he direct you to what's needed? How does that work?
Well, it doesn't work very well anymore. There are acquiring editors who see some value in the book, and first an agent has to see some value in the book to get an agent, which is a terrible, terrible chore to go through these days. Because
and you have to have an agent?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you can go to a small press and what they call over the transom, submit but even in those cases now they want to, because it's all done electronically, they may want to see the first 10 pages of the work or an outline and chapters, headings, those sorts of things. But for the most part, it pays to have an agent. And they're a dying breed too. I mean, because so many people just publish the books on their own and sell it through Amazon, and cutting out all the middlemen involved. But those
books are not recognized in the Library of Congress, am I?
Yes, they are. As long as they have an ISBN number, sure they are.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. You have to get an ISBN number to make it worthwhile.
How do you go about getting an ISBN number?
You apply through to the Library of Congress, and I think you have to send them a manuscript or whatever it might be. I mean, if you have a publisher, they do that for you. But an ISBN number guarantees that.
So then if you self-publish, then you would send them the book that's published, and they would applying for it. Am I correct?
I think after you have the ISBN number and the book is published, I'm not sure how that works because I haven't done that, but I do have a friend, a former colleague of mine who has done several books, the sort of travel/history of there's a major highway that runs down the center of the United States, all the way from the Dakotas down through Texas, and he's written 3 volumes breaking them up the highway. I forget which route it is, and that goes down to and he's done them on his own, and he's done quite nicely because the other thing is publicists today are there again, unless it's somebody like a Hillary Clinton writing a book, or you get virtually no publicity. And the only way to get publicity is to get a giant advance that they have to make back, If you get a $500,000 advance, they're going to want to spend money to get back that $500,000. If there are a number of publishers. I didn't get any advance at all, and there are a number of publishers that operate the same way. So when it comes time for publicity, you have to do a good deal on your own. That's why I always remember the gifts from the garbage story, because you have to really get out there and promote the book. And it's not easy.
Do they make it up to you? If they give you no advance, do they make it up to you on the back end?
No. You get a percentage of each sale, but that's about it. We did have an interest.
It wouldn't be a higher percentage if they didn't give you the advance, and a lower percentage if you were paying advance money back.
No. It's the percentage is not all that much either. We did, I had a co-author on this, Joshua Drazen, a family friend who was an attorney up in New England in Connecticut, and I needed someone because you don't get any editors these days. I wanted someone that could actually and if you have somebody that's as focused in on the details as Josh is and was, you really don't need an editor because Josh was wonderful. He was able to find minor discrepancies in the facts that we were using. One quick example is because the book includes what's going on in the world at the time of the games, time of the team. We discussed a bit, just briefly, about the Battle of Midway that was going on while there was a battle going on in the American League, and Josh found that I had misspelled the phonetic spelling of one of the Japanese battleships that had been destroyed. I misspelled it by 2 letters or something. Now, who in the world, would know that? But Josh did. Yeah, but as an editor, he did. Now, I must say, we have not had any negative feedback in terms of, that's a glaring error. That's a mistake. It happened such and such a time. So we're very proud of that fact. But there are the editors today don't exist. They don't do. What's his name? The famous editor who worked with F. Scott Fitzgerald and Thomas Wolfe at Scribner's. These people don't exist. They left it. Whatever goes. I remember when I did You Gotta Believe, I capitalized the T in the Bronx, and whoever was doing some kind of editor said it has to come out. I said no, it doesn't. It's the Bronx, and it'd be going blue. Okay, so that was the end of the argument. So that
because you had capitalized the T, you had a man.
Sure, we capitalized the T.
I've seen so often that it's with this. I'm not arguing the point.
I know.
With a small T.
Yeah, no. I mean,
you capitalize it, David? Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I know for a fact that if you cite the New York Times in a publication, and the publication is authentic in terms of adhering to names and places and things like that, they will insist that the T in the New York Times be capitalized because it's in the head, the logo there up at the top is the New York Times.
Right.
Yeah. So I
say the Brooklyn with a small T. So why?
Well, then you'd be really wrong, wouldn't you?
But the people who are native New Yorkers, and the people who are just passing.
Well, I'll give you another example. I did an article. I used to write for a magazine called Islands. That got me a great trip down to the Dominican Republic to write a piece which actually won an award for baseball in the Dominican Republic. And but in a previous article, I had mentioned the East River. Now, anyone who has set foot in New York knows there's the Hudson River and the East River, and they didn't send me a galley copy of the article, as most legitimate magazines will do, to make you do the final check, and it came out East River, just without the article, without the. And I was really upset because it shouldn't have been that way. No one I've ever heard. Have you ever heard anybody call it East River? The East River Drive. But you don't call the river East. Yeah, don't call it what? It's the East River.
Yeah.
So hey, Michael, you're a playwright. May I ask you how that works in terms with having an editor?
I never wrote a play. You mean a screenplay?
Screenplay, I meant.
Oh yeah, talk about that. You did some great stuff.
Did you work alone? Did you work with someone?
No, I have for screenplay. I have a partner, Rick Podell.
Okay.
And so as far as editor, the best part of writing a movie is the first draft, because nobody bothers you. You write what you feel is good, but once you hand it in, then come the notes, and that's when the problems and the work, in a way, really starts, because you have to please the people who are giving you notes. Change this. Can you take out this character? Can you make this character a tall black person instead of a short white person? Some of the notes are absurd, and you try to fight some of them, but if the studio's paying you and you want to have a chance of it getting made, you have to go along with some of these things. So it's, and then the director will often change things, so it's why they call it a collaboration. when you're writing a screenplay. And that's why so many writers wind up directing what they've written so they can get said what they want to say without a lot of interference. That's what happens often.
Michael and Rick wrote Nothing in Common, that wonderful Jackie Gleason, Tom Hanks movie. I think that was Tom Hanks' first movie, wasn't it?
Hanks' first movie? No, he had done.
But I love that story. I love that story.
Well, thank you.
How did it come about that you wrote that, Michael?
Well, that was very much a true story based on Rick's life. And one day we were talking, and we just thought that might be an interesting script about a son who really didn't have much communication with his parents, and then the parents split up, and all of a sudden they needed help from the son, and now he had to help these people, and there hadn't been much love between any of them. And so we thought that now the parents are coming to the child, and so we just sat down and wrote it on spec. It's called on our own. And that's
how did you go about once it was completed? How did you go about marketing it or selling it?
Well, we sent it to we both had different agents, but it really got going when it was sent to one agent to a new Tom Hanks agent, even though he wasn't a huge star then as yet, and that person felt this would be a good vehicle for him, and I'm pretty sure he was under contract for another picture to one of the companies, and they felt, this could be the picture. And
now, so that's how the decision was made. It was made totally by people that not involved in the writing of
Oh, right. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, not involved in the writing at all. No. The only involvement.
So, in essence, you really don't know who you're writing to. You're in other words, you're trying to impress the studio. You're trying to impress an audience. You're trying to impress the actors because they're the ones that are going to, take up the parts and make it happen. It's very complex.
Oh, it is. I'm sure, obviously, there are some times where you're writing for this actor or actress, and maybe that actor or actress is in it from the beginning. As far as, yes, I'll do this script or I'll do this story, and people have contracts. There's just so many ways. A director may have a contract to do a few movies for a studio. And there's so much as, who's the hot ticket right now. I remember after the movie came out, we must have had 40 interviews around town. Of course, all of a sudden, we had a movie made where before nobody wanted to meet you, and now a lot of people want to meet you. Same thing happened. We wrote a comedy pilot, and I remember this one guy who would barely say hello to us, an agent. And at the party after the pilot was shot, and there was a chance it could become a series, remember this guy putting his arm around me and taking me around and introducing me to everybody. Because at that moment, there was the chance we could be very successful. So it's such a game. It's such a game. And then I think I told you there was the time where when I was doing a lot of stand-up, I was at a party. I was with my wife, and this guy came over to me and said, so what are you doing? What are you up to? And my wife said, you're his agent. Honest to God. He goes, what? You're his agent. What are you asking?
Oh, God.
So true story.
I never heard that one.
Yours. Oh, that's right. Yes. So well, it's such a game. It's such a game.
Tell me, is that a joke? Is that a true story?
No, not at all. No, that's a true story. That is a true story. You knew you were in trouble.
And you and her laughed about that for the rest of your time together.
Yes, we did. That's what kept our marriage together. Yes. No, but that's there's another time we went to Rick and I had a meeting and we're waiting in the lobby of this building and this woman comes down the stairs. She has two people with her. And she comes over and she said, Rick, Mike, how are you doing? I said, fine, how are you? She says, what are you doing here? And I said, we have a meeting. And she said, with who? And we said, you. She says, me? You? Oh, well, I'm buying a second house. Can I see you another time? Well, yeah. But I've never forgotten. Who's you meeting with? With you. Oh, so you don't know what to. It's so bizarre.
And even though she knew she knew you by name and recognition.
Yeah, but what are you doing here? Oh,
what are you doing?
Well, it's not just showbiz; it's life like that. I was in the Air Force, stationed at Travis. They put you in barracks, little dorm rooms, and there's a dorm chief, whatever they call them. Just the airmen who would just kind of watch over things, arrange the schedule for cleaning and what have you. And I'm there 2.5 years living in this barracks, and he knows.
Whoa!
And he comes up to me one day with a piece of paper. He says, "Give this to your roommate, Tycho." It was like, yeah, the same thing as an agent, I am Tycho, but nice to meet you.
2.5 years you lived in the
2.5 years, a guy, just, there's probably 20 of us, 15 rooms maybe, 20 of us. Could you imagine having to memorize all those names and have 2.5 years to do it?
What were you doing for 2.5 years there?
I know, that's what I still wonder about that. It's 45 years later. So what, were you drafted or you enlisted? I would have been drafted. It was 1965, and I got a letter, and I had two choices. And, one of them, you go to Canada or whatever. I didn't want to go to war, but what do? So I joined the Air Force with the idea that I would probably be out of combat or safer, not really knowing, but I did know it. Odds-wise, you were better off. You'd be better off. And turns out I didn't go to Viet Nam. I spent the time at Travis Air Force Base, halfway between Sacramento and San Francisco, and stayed out here all my life.
I would have joined the Navy because the Viet Cong did not have a Navy, as far as I know. So I think I'd be pretty safe,
That's true. But, when I joined, I'm 20 years old. I had no idea. It's 65, the war's heating up, but I had no idea what it was about. And what they told me at the recruiter was that you'd be on a base if you did go to Vietnam, and the Army would protect you, and around the Army would be the Marines protecting you. So but they didn't tell you about two things. One of them was mortars that they had coming in. So you could be, it's a new warfare besides the Viet Cong who would get you when you're sleeping at night, that kind of thing. And they didn't tell anybody about Agent Orange. And I'll tell you what, I've come to know veterans over the years and been in groups and what have you. There's a lot of people who were lied to and just tragically died of the effects of Agent Orange, or suffer for long periods of time. And we didn't know anything about PDS or whatever the hell it is.
PTSD,
So, just as a kid going in, I might have been better off go as you say, going into the Navy. We were a lot safer from that. But Tally, my partner's dad, was a Navy veteran, and he was affected by Agent Orange, and that caused his early demise. War is terrible. Universally, every war has its own characteristics. One is worse than the other, and I think the next thing, we're seeing that in the Middle East, is this poison gas.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds
I don't know how they can protect this country. I don't know how Homeland Security can protect this country from that germ warfare and what have you. It's frightening.
Yeah, I think though, Ralph, you uttered the funniest line of the whole show, and that is, the Army will protect you.
Yes, exactly. I'm a king. Oh yeah, well, I'll be protected. I'll be in my blue uniform, and they'll protect me in the brown uniform. But the way the guy described it, the recruiter described it, there would be like the base, and the Army would have a perimeter around the base, and around the Army's perimeter was the Marines' perimeter. He says, you'll be safe. Don't worry about it.
Oh, God.
Then once I got in,
I used to
hear stories, and I did everything possible to keep from going to Vietnam, to stay at Travis, and could do a show on that. Everything legally possible. There was that fine line of you want an honorable discharge, and you want to get through it. But you got to be you. So I had many interactions with the chain of command that didn't always go well along the way. And what did you do? What did you both do during the war? How'd you get out of Vietnam, gentlemen? We'll start with you.
When I graduated college, like you, I was getting letters like, come join us. And I said, well, I'm going to go. So I went to graduate school, which kept me out for about 2 years. And then after 2 years, there it was again, come join us. So all I did was delay the inevitable. And my mother knew someone whose son was in a reserve unit in Harlem, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And I heard you could get into that unit, and especially if you were a college graduate, and you could also afford a bottle of scotch. Meaning you went for an interview and you said, oh, sir, I just thought you might like to drink. So you bribed the guy. And I got in and I had a sign that I would go to officer school, officer candidate school.
Right.
And so I'll try to make this a short story. So I went to basic training, and then that was in January of '67, and then in '68. No, then that summer I went to officer candidate school for 2 weeks in Peekskill, New York. I forgot the name of the fort or whatever, but it was run by. And stop me if I told the story again. I was run by West Point cadets, who were, needless to say, very gung ho, which was slightly opposite from me. But I got through it. As a matter of fact, I even wrote some things for their little paper. And at the end, it was interesting. One of the cadets said, "We don't think you want to be an officer." It's like, "Oh, how'd you guess?" But the guy said to me, "Of all the people, all the recruits or whatever we've had here, you are the one person I would like to be my friend," which I've always remembered. So I go back to the Harlem unit, and they're cutting the number of people. And since I now no longer was officer candidate material, they were going to let me go. And it's like, where do I go? And I was able to join an Army unit and in Manhattan, like, I don't know, 69th Street Armory. There was some armory there.
Yes, I remember that.
Which was the greatest thing because you did nothing. You reported at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday once a month. You took a rag, you polished a cannon, and then you went away for 8 hours, and you came back and you signed out.
Oh.
So, stupid me, they decided now there was rumor they were going to send this unit to Vietnam. So I got nervous, and a friend of mine was in a unit, an Air Force unit in New Jersey. And I went there, and they're all swimming in a pool in a motel. I said, "What the hell is this?" He said, you come on Saturday, you sign your name, and you go swimming. I said, "Get me in this unit. I don't want to go to Vietnam from the other unit."
Right.
Long story short, I joined the Air Force unit, and a month later, this Air Force unit, a small, like 20, 30 guys, who were called to active duty in April of 1968, and the Army unit that I had managed to get out of, nobody touched them. And I wound up in Korea for 7 months.
Wow.
So
I never knew that.
Never know. Yeah, I was in Korea for 7 months, and there was talk of Vietnam, but luckily they decided to send us home. And so I did stuff, but I had a good time in Korea, even though there was a war going on not far away.
What did you do as a job in Korea?
Oh, well, the truth, when we got there, and this is a true story, when we got to the base in Kunsan, 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 South Korea, obviously. Remember, we got there, and this officer said to me, drive that truck out to the airplane. I said, "No, sir, you don't." He says, "Get going." I said, "Sir, you get going." I said, I got in the truck. Now, what this guy didn't know is I had driven a little bit up to then as far as a car, but I never drove a truck, and not a stick shift.
Stick shift?
This is a big truck. And I'm leaning out the window going, sir, he says, drive the fucking truck out to the airport. Yes, sir. Well, do you ever see a truck not being driven but bounce like a kangaroo on a runway? And it was headed right to the plane. And I didn't know how to stop it. Honest to God, I'm not making this up. Now I'm hearing stop, yelling, people are yelling, and there are airport police coming out with fucking guns. Because I'm heading to the airplane. And I don't know to this day how I stopped. It's like a movie. I stopped maybe, 50 yards from blowing up South Korea, from hitting the plane. And they pulled me out of the truck, and this general or something said, as long as you're in Korea, if you go near a vehicle, we will have you shot. Yes, sir, I'm sorry. So my job, I wound up in a shack, the airport shack where when people wanted to go on leave, they would come in and give me their name, and I would write down their name, and they'd go on the airplane. That was my job.
Oh, wow.
It was
nice.
That was, and then, and sometimes at night, like once every 10 days, you'd have to guard, I swear, when you're talking about, being surrounded by the Air Force and the Army at Travis Air Force Base, they put you in a shack here in Kunsan, and it was as dark as the night was. Just there were hardly any lights. You couldn't see anything, and it was your job in case North Korea attacked for me to stop the North Korean Army from my shack. I didn't even have a weapon. So I could see myself like with a pencil outside the shack going, stop, I'm going to write your name down if you don't stop. and that's what happened.
I'm reporting you.
So I had some, that was the worst, to be sitting out there by yourself for 12 hours. But I had a radio, and, that's when I started to do some comedy. I would do a 2-hour routine to nobody, but I thought, I'm brilliant.
Well, I'll tell you how the service is like that. I did have a working environment, and I started doing comedy with my friend Rich. We were so bored that we not even our own jokes. We go the same jokes every night. Rich, how's the wife? Pretty good. How's mine? Is your girl free? Oh, but she's reasonable. Do 30 jokes like that. Mommy, can I go out and play? Shut up and deal. And we just go back and forth,
right,
making people not laugh. It was as important to us to make people not laugh as it was to laugh. We were a little strange along those lines.
That's very strange. Making people laugh.
Yeah. I'll tell you, if you just look around in the service, if you're in the service, it writes itself. Material writes itself. I mean,
oh yeah, oh, absolutely. I think I had the only gay barber in South Korea who followed me around for 2 weeks.
you waiting for that next
I wouldn't get a haircut.
Yes.
Did I tell you that story?
No, but I can.
I wouldn't get a haircut. They kept sending me to the barber shop, and I'd go in, stay there for 15 minutes, and come out, and go over to the officer and salute, and they would say, "Good haircut," because they were so. So one guy finally said, "Oh, wait a minute, we're going to take you inside this time." And it was all girls cutting hair, except so there was an empty chair, and I sat down, and I don't mean to make fun of gay people, but this guy comes floating out from behind the curtain, and he starts cutting my hair, and he's going, "Oh, you have nice hair, very nice. Can I touch your hair?" "Yeah, touch my hair." Oh, well, what nice ears. You have beautiful ears. Look how the hair touch your ears. The hair. And he kept going. Oh, I love your neck. What a nice... Shut up. And he said, you come back tomorrow? I said, no, I'm not coming back tomorrow. Oh, I cut your hair again. I keep cutting. Oh, you're so nice. And I leave, and then that night, I'm sitting in the mess hall with friends, and they start pointing at a window. And the guy's outside the window. He's waving and throwing me kisses. Honest to God. I say, great. I'm a guy in love with me. Where am I going to hide? And it took 2 weeks to
you didn't
persuade
have to
him.
go to Korea to find people in the service who would be in love with you. Ralph and Rich would sit there, and we had a kid come in. I'm not going to mention his last name. Thomas was his first name. Thomas would come in, and he'd go, oh, Ralph, Rich, don't touch that. It's dirty. So dirty. It was the computer screen or whatever it was. He just flitted a little bit, and he was not harmful. He just flitted, but he'd say, dirty. Don't touch that. It's so dirty, Ralph. This is part of growing up. What the hell do I care? Knock yourself out. But maybe
you're right.
Went to Korea, met a barber, and they lived happily ever after.
So was that right? Was that him? Was that Thomas? Look at that.
I don't want to hog this. I just want to go back one step to when I was deciding, when I got those letters, and we're talking about Agent Orange. I'm standing out in front of the apartment building that my mother grew up in. We had my mother's apartment, and I'm standing there. I'm shaking because I get this letter from the draft board. Guy named from the neighborhood comes by in an Air Force uniform. He was coming back from basic training and tech school, and he had a stripe, and it's a blue uniform, and his dress uniform wasn't khaki, and he walks by and he says, hey, how you doing? I say, oh, I got this letter. He's the one that told me to go to the recruiter and to join the Air Force because of his experience in, he was mellow. He was going to get a job wherever he was stationed, and he thought it was pretty cool. Here's the gist of it. I go in, join the Air Force. Years later, I find out that Kenny Kirsch is the Air Force now, not even the Army and the Marines. He died after a long, painful battle with, deterioration, cancer, this, that, and the other thing. The effects of Agent Orange.
No.
He's the guy that told me to go in because it would be safe.
Wow.
I go in, it's safe for me. I'm stationed at Travis. My buddy, one of my buddies from the neighborhood, joins. He gets stationed in Marin County, doesn't go to Viet Nam. He gets stationed in Marin County. So a third buddy joins, my buddy Marty, who incidentally, Marty Rose, I do the New York Met podcast on this station with. He and I grew up like you guys did. We were friends. We went to the Y together when we were 10 years old. So we have the same kind of stuff that you guys have. Point being, he goes in. He does get stationed in Vietnam, and we didn't even know it about Agent Orange until the last 10 years of our lives. But he was affected by that, and he had some health problems that he's recovered from. It's the luck of the draw. My buddy Steve and I both went in. We were both stationed statewide. It was, it took some doing to get out of going to Vietnam, and it wasn't fun being an airman the haircut thing, very true. We hated to get haircuts. They'd have you. What's the difference if your hair's just a little bit longer? It puts I mean, all you did was think about that for 2 weeks instead of doing your job. In other words, it was called chicken shit stuff that they throw at you, where if they didn't throw that stuff out, it could be a pleasant work environment. And you know what? It's just like life. Just like the management labor situation is today. There's very few enlightened employers 50 years later who can realize, if you get your employees to work with you and you befriend them and you don't make the little things an issue, you get a lot more done. And you still get in every walk of life. Banking, I talk to people in banking. I was in the insurance business, in a straight life after getting out of the Air Force. It's all the same. It's the small little things that make the worker crazy go nuts. Really isn't the big things. It's I was going to say crazy. Postal system's a good example. They don't have to make you nuts. They do it almost as because they want to, and that's my riff on labor management. But that's what I wanted to interject, and I did say something too that I didn't get along particularly well with the chain of command. I have sitting there in that office that I told you guys about that was a supply expedite. We would supply maintenance with parts, and they were rudimentary computers back in those days. Big IBM stuff. You get a big room. My cell phone has enough capability, as much capability as a big room of computers back in those days. But we would type our 80-card punch cards, ordering parts and what have you. And this guy comes and looks. I'm sitting there taking orders on the phone. This guy comes and puts the largest nose that ever was over my shoulder and is looking at what I'm doing without introducing himself, nothing. And he's got one more stripe than I had. And I looked up at him and just made, I'm a 20-year-old kid, made this kind of remark, that kind of remark. Made his Sergeant Junger, who was himself a Hitler youth before coming to this country with hello. And then he gets in the Air Force, and he's a career Air Force guy, and he had one more stripe than me. So I said, well, I insulted this guy. What the hell? Next day he comes in, he's got another stripe. And he's the swing shift commander, sergeant in charge, whatever they called him. I had to work with him for a year and a half. He hated my guts. He'd walk around, well, this isn't the way we did it here. Look busy. Here comes the colonel. And I said, you're a working sergeant, you piece of shit. Why don't you come in and why don't you sit down and help us? So, and he told the colonel that as soon as I walked in. She called you here, but he called me. And Colonel Radesky was a Jewish guy who would take me aside and say, everything will be all right. He said, but the Sergeant Junger, the Hitler Youth, sticks in my mind all these many years. Many stories to be told about the service. Now I've got to ask David Hubler, who's listened to all of this, and unless you were in the service, you can't possibly understand what we're talking about. Did you have any service experience?
I did 6 months in Lower Manhattan. I was in the NYU ROTC program.
Oh, wow.
Air Force. I like the uniform. My friends, it's true.
Right.
My friends who are at City College, they got these ratty old. The Army had switched to green, years ago, and then my friends were walking around with these ratty khaki uniforms that looked like General Pershing had given them out. And they were just ugly. So when it came to my turn, I chose the Air Force, and
the uniform?
we got a nice blue uniform. You get to keep the shoes.
Kenny Kirsch walking down the street in a blue uniform.
Yeah,
Kenny
exactly.
Who was a couple of years older than me, and one of those kids, and you always respect the kids who are a little older. He danced. He was coming to see Karen Sherman in my building, who was...
Oh, Karen,
Oh, yeah, I heard about her.
Very pretty. You would remember.
Yeah.
Very pretty, and Kenny was a good-looking kid. They would dance. They would go to Philadelphia and dance on Dick Clark's show. So I admired
you had a
Kenny
crush
Kirsch,
on her.
and I saw him in that blue uniform, and I instantly what a connect we have there, David.
Yeah, yeah.
And isn't it amazing that you let the color of one lets as a kid, would let the color of a uniform determine how the rest of my life is going to go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it looked a lot neater. It looked newer, of course. And
why did you join the ROTC, or did you have to?
No, I didn't. No, the only people who have to join ROTC go to what they call land grant universities, where they're required to teach ROTC. I went into it because you had a choice of ROTC or bowling for physical education, and it's true. We were on, the downtown campus is in Washington Square, the very end of Fifth Avenue there, and the bowling alley was all the way up on like 12th Street, 13th Street, and I didn't want to walk all the way up there to go bowling for 40 minutes, so I joined the Air Force ROTC, and
that's very funny.
But it's true too.
It's interesting that the powers that be give you just those two choices.
Yeah, so I said, and you had to pay tuition on top of it. You had to pay, it was one credit course, so you had to pay in those days you paid by the credit hour as opposed to later on they changed over. But
now, did that end up keeping you out of the service, or
no? But I do have, it's one of my prized possessions. You remember the draft card? We all had draft cards. Mine is signed in ink by Louis B. Hershey himself. Now, I wound up getting a classification, the same one that Muhammad Ali had, for some reason. Now, I suspect. I had an uncle who worked for NSA for many years, and he got me down for a job interview at NSA. And they put me up for a couple of nights. I think it was 2 nights. And I had a roommate, and I always thought the roommate was like the guy that was spying on me. He was really in the agency. So I was on my best behavior. We didn't tell dirty jokes or anything at night because I didn't want to, wash out immediately. So so I took these tests, and my math prowess came to the fore once again, and I flunked the test. So, because I'm a terrible mathematician, I'm just awful. But and soon thereafter, and this is totally unsolicited. I said my suspicions are that somehow, and my uncle didn't know Louis B. Hershey, although Clark Griffith too was a good friend of his, but I never knew Clark Griffith. So, it came in the mail, and I was suddenly classified 1Y, and that was the last I ever heard of the military. So I dropped out of the ROTC because what would happen is, you get demerits if your uniform wasn't. Well, I'd have nicely, really spit-shine shoes. You had to you had to find an old stocking, a woman's stocking, and polish the tips so they shone like. And I would do that, and then I'd get in the subway to go down to West 4th Street.
Well,
and
I'd just like to know how you found the woman's stocking. I think that would be...
My mother gave me an old one. That's
okay.
Nothing too racy. But and you walked around with this thing. You carried them in your pocket so you could keep polishing the shoes. The problem was I'd get on the New York subway, and by the time I got out of West 4th Street, half of Manhattan had walked over my feet to get either in or out. Right. And I was always getting demerits. So at the end of the semester,
that's very funny.
At the end of the semester, I said, "Yeah, bowling sounds pretty good to me." So, because you had to have a year of either PT or ROTC. So I went bowling. So I went bowling for the spring semester.
I got a quick story to tell about coming home from basic training or tech school in my costume, and my mother was so happy to see me in that. I looked good, as a kid. She took me to a Broadway matinee, and she says, "I'll take you to I'd love to go to Broadway shows. Wear your uniform, please, for me especially. Please, could you wear it?" So I wore the uniform. She wore her mink jacket. And we're on, it's either the intermission or whatever. Woman comes over to me. I thought she was going to say something. Well, thank you for serving, or what do you, you're in. She says, "Could you get me a cab?" She thought I was a bellboy.
Doorman. Yeah.
And my mother I remember the tears rolled out of her eyes. She was laughing so hard. Standing there, "Can you get me a cab?" That's great.
Well, I tried to get into Yankee Stadium as a service member when I went down there with my uniform on, because they used to let the servicemen in for 25 cents or tax, whatever it was. And nope, you had to show your active duty ID, so that was a disappointment.
Oh.
That was another one of my service-related disappointments.
Well, we would come back and tell stories, Rich and I, about the fun that we were having off base, because it really was a pretty good gig. You work 5 days a week. You get two days off. We work swing shift. And we'd get off the base and have a lot of fun. And Junger would come back, the Kraut, we called him, and the Kraut would stand there and he'd go, "You were having fun off the base. Did you wear your uniform?" Yeah.
Colonel Klink.
He said, "Are you wearing your uniform?" And the Air Force, all these stories come to me, they used to have a bulletin board, and they would publish the names of the bars, because at that time it was, the 1968, the Summer of Love, and the big scare was marijuana for the troops. And the big scare for the troops was you couldn't find the marijuana. You didn't know where to go. But we would go to the bulletin board, and they would post the bars that they didn't want you to go to because they were the illicit bar, or, which turns out to be where we got the names of the places to go to.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So they saved you all that running around. It was really nice of them. Life management.
It was sort of like the Zagat's, the rating guide to restaurants.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Thank you very much. We go. And we talk about it. did you wear your uniform? He didn't want the uniform disgraced, as if 20-year-old kids are going to go out in their uniforms to have fun. No.
Well, you could pick up girls that way. It was easy to.
No, it wasn't. This is Northern California.
Oh.
You got very little respect for being, and servicemen, Viet Nam, coming back. I hear stories. It was terrible for them coming back. It really was Navy too. I live in what was a Navy town back in the day, Alameda. There was a Navy base that just was turned over to the city for private use recently, and so it was. I know a lot of folks who came back in those days. They didn't want to give you bank accounts. There was no respect for servicemen. That war tore a lot of this country apart.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Parents and, all of it. Kids that wanted to rebel. My son's uncle, Mark Satin, who is a political writer of some esteem, he wrote, he escaped to Canada, exactly the same age I was in 1965. He escaped to Canada, tore his family apart in so doing, and wrote the Draft Dodgers Handbook. I don't know, that was a cult book in those days, and still find it. And he and I had talked over the years about, ways of options that we both had, and I thought what he did was a lot more gutsy than what I did, selling myself out. To go, like, as you mentioned, Ali, the same kind of deferment that for it. Nobody over there hated us. No, it was us, our imperialistic ways, basically for their oil, as I understand it. Looking back, revisionist history, but some people had that innate notion that it was wrong. And all I cared about in those days was saving my own ass. I wasn't thinking in terms was the war is wrong, this, that, and the other thing. Am I indirectly contributing to it even from Travis? Because I more than indirectly, I was directly contributing to warfare. But I was just I was just dull enough or just self-possessed enough. All I was interested in doing is saving my own ass. I didn't see any of what was wrong with it until I went in and I saw the lies that were being told, that they would say, well, in the Air Force times, they would say, we had 28 casualties last week. And I would, in my off days or off time, go down to the flight line and just watch them unload 141s, the number of bodies that, coffins that they would unload, never matched up with the totals of, with the statistics of how many people are being killed. I'm counting 240, and it's Tuesday. Next Tuesday, another 380. And then you read about it in the Air Force Times, 28, 32. So that's when I really started to quiver, and I realized we're being lied to, just like we were lied to with the Warren Commission, just like we were lied to about our involvement in World War II with what the hell is it in Hawaii? where we attacked Pearl Harbor. I think that FDR knew that it was coming. You guys may be able to speak to that, David.
No, I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay, well, they talk like as if they knew it was coming. They didn't realize it would be this extensive, but we needed, as a country, an excuse to get into the war. People were not, they knew what was going on with the Germans and the concentration camps and the killing of Jews, and it was ignored in this country. The powers that be, the Joseph Kennedys and the FDRs, really ignored it for a long time. But maybe that's for another show.
Right.
Okay. We've skipped around a lot. Anything you want to add, guys?
I'm sort of dry now. I mean, I can't think of anything. We certainly covered a large amount of ground.
You've listened to my babble.
Well, we've all sort of, and we've enjoyed your babble. So,
okay. Thank you. I enjoy your company, gentlemen, and next week will be a little bit more humorous as opposed to getting into the. So I never thought we'd get into the war. Just the way it goes. But I enjoyed your stories, Michael.
Yeah, so did
I. Well, I'm going to run and get a haircut now. So.
Well, we went so long today, it probably did grow.
Watch for Thomas. And David, I would have no idea that you were a bowler.
I'm not very good. No, I was terrible.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. We'll do it again next week.
Okay. Take care.
And, I will look forward to it. If you're listening out there and you enjoyed this offering or any of the offerings on the network, I hope that you will box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program wherever you live. There are kids that need to read for a myriad of reasons. They need to develop a passion. They need to get their noses out of the computers and the devices with the games. They need to become school ready, and the way to do that is through reading. Kids are our future. We've messed up this generation, and our only hope is that kids can learn from it, and best way to do it is by reading. We have writers here, not me, but writers on this and other shows that are examples of successes that come from early reading. So be well, gentlemen, and thank you for listening, everybody out there.
Bye-bye.
Owned Radio Network.
Bye.
The show is Bronx Roots with David Hubler and Michael Preminger. Thank you, everybody.